Katia, you have the ball.
Thank you, Bill. Welcome, everyone, to another webinar on Native American ELs. This webinar, in particularly, will focus on effective ways to teach Native American language and culture. Today's webinar is hosted by the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition, NCELA, located at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development at the George Washington University, funded through a contract with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of English Language Acquisition. Our mission at NCELA is to provide technical assistance information to state and local educational agencies on issues pertaining to English language learners. My name is Katia Flemons, a Senior Research Associate at NCELA and your webinar moderator today. Today we have a wonderful lineup of presenters, but before we go on to our presenters, I just wanted to note that the contents of this webinar, including information or handouts, do not necessarily reflect the views or policy of the Department of Education, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. If any of our participants run into technical difficulties, please feel free to call the number on the screen, 1-866-229-3239. And if participants wish to still submit questions, please submit them by clicking the third tab on the top right-hand corner of the screen that says Q&A, and Q&As are to be submitted to the presenters in chat box in text format. Okay? So we begin with our presenters, and we'll have a short remark from Trinidad Torres Carrion, Education Program Specialist from the Office of English Language Acquisition at the U.S. Department of Education. Trini?
Thank you, Katia. Welcome, everyone. I am very proud to say that OELA has funded 18 projects out of 21 that are teaching the native language as part of their programs. And as part of that OELA's Technical Assistance Plan, we have invited these two experts to share and discuss appropriate strategies and best practices that will help our grantees achieve the goals and objectives of their programs. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy. Back to you, Katia.
Thank you, Trini. And we will continue with the introduction of our presenters. And our first presenter today is Nāmaka Rawlins, who serves as the past chair of the federally mandated state Native Hawaiian Education Council and is on the advisory board of the State of Hawaii Office of Language Access. Along with Nāmaka is Robin Butterfield, Senior Program Policy Specialist Analyst, Quality School Programs, and Resources at the National Education Association, NEA. And just to note a little bit about our presenters, our first presenter today will be Nāmaka Rawlins. And Nāmaka is the outreach specialist currently at AHA Punana Inc. Ms. Rawlins was raised in the Kaukaha Hawaiian homestead. She serves as the past chair of the federally mandated State Native Hawaiian Education Council. She recently completed her 3-year term on the board of the National Indian Education Association, and she has extensive experience helping tribal groups establish language nests, language survival schools, and native language colleges, including hosting groups to the Aha Punana Leo developed model sites in Hilo, Hawaii. Okay, and we would like to welcome now Nāmaka Rawlins.
Aloha mai kākou. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm here in Hawaii, and so it is morning, but good afternoon, everyone participating on today's webinar. My presentation today focuses on the last 30 years in which we, Aha Punana Leo, have learned through practice on effective ways for Native American language instruction and revitalization. The Punana Leo, which means language nest, similar to the Maori in New Zealand's Kohanga Reo, is the most effective strategy we have found in Native American language instruction and revitalization. The chain of islands that make up the state of Hawaii and the Punana Leo Language Nest Classroom are the pictures on this first slide. I will focus on addressing Native American language issues through the Punana Leo model and perspective for indigenous-based multilingual education. Our perspective is an international one, as the United States is only now coming out of a period where Native American languages were suppressed in educational policy and practice. It has only been since 1990 that U.S. policy changed to support and promote the use of Native American languages. And it has been only a year that the United States announced its support to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples to further policy on America's indigenous populations. We know that our work in Hawaii can inform, support, and educate the federal government in its role of federal policy and support for Native American languages, namely American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian, in instruction to actualize the end result of language shift and reversal to save our native languages while improving on English outcomes. I start with 5 main issues related to today's webinar. Many Native Americans believe that language is key to our identity, spirituality, and culture. We know that our traditional songs are our stories and that they hold information of the past. Organizations such as the National Indian Education Association have issued a number of resolutions in support of our Native American languages. There is a growing interest among Native American communities. It is predicted that by the end of this century, every single Native American language is facing extinction. There is said to have been some 300 Native indigenous languages in what is now the United States upon Columbus's arrival. By 1990, only half remain, with only 20 that have children speakers. However, there is still a rapid decline happening today, even with these 20 languages. Our languages are declining quickly. Every citizen has a right to an identity. However, we know that many Native Americans in the late 1800s and early 1900s were forced to give up their identity by removing them from their homes and putting boarding schools and their languages taken away to acculturate the children to the American way of life. Even compulsory education on the reservation conducted totally in English from kindergarten to age 16, or 10 years of a child's life, essentially sends a message that your language does not have a future. However, we do have a right to our languages. The question is, what exactly does that mean? Issue 4 is that governments, including tribal governments, have a right to their languages. Hawaiian is an official language of Hawaii state government. The last issue on effective ways of teaching Native American language is that not only do we need our own languages, but we need English and other foreign languages. We need highly educated, multilingual Native American citizens for our government. We need highly educated citizens that know our own culture and that know English and other cultures. Aha Punana Leo means Language Nest Organization. P20 means preschool through doctorate. Here is a brief history leading up to the Aha Punana Leo's leadership in addressing Native language and culture revitalization. Hawaiian culture has a saying about the importance of our language. Ika olelo no keola, ika olelo no kamake. Kamehameha III, Hawaii's monarch, established a system of education over 160 years ago in the 1840s. We were one of the most literate people in the world. We had over 100 Hawaiian language newspapers. With the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii, Hawaiian medium schools were closed in 1896. Our language rapidly declined. Our elders realized this and were pushing to revitalize our language and culture in the 1960s and 1970s. Ahapunana Leo was established in 1983, and by that time, there were less than 50 children speakers out of a population of some 300,000. We benefited from our elders as they helped us move our language into the university and into the elementary schools. They supported our language nest. We created the environment for Native speakers to come together with our preschoolers and families. We worked with second language learners from the university. We used Hawaiian exclusively with the children to create a new generation of Hawaiian language speakers. Part of our effort was a successful passage of the Native American Languages Act. Both the NAMA and the UN Declaration policies proclaim we can use our languages in schools and that it can be a basis of education. Our languages can be the real language of individuals, community, and governments. Hawaiian is an official language of our state government, and since establishing the Hawaiian medium elementary schools in the mid-1980s, our children can go to school through grade 12 in an education through Hawaiian. Similar to Puerto Rico, where education is in Spanish, the federal government recognizes the right of Puerto Rico's government's education to their language. Many tribes have also declared their languages official. Through practical application, we have developed the P20 system for Hawaiian-based multilingualism, where students will learn Hawaiian, English, and other languages along with academics. A language nest survival school model. What does our system look like? We refer to the language nest and survival school model in describing the system. It is spreading around the United States. Currently, Hawaii has the only model that goes through grade 12. There are other schools in Hawaii that follow this model. Our big goals are that Hawaiian survives as a primary language and English as an auxiliary language. In other words, that Hawaiian be the home and everyday language of the children, and English be the additional language, like Europe, like Puerto Rico. Similar to the Scandinavian model in Finland, with its two official languages, high academics and high multilingualism, we seek higher academic and foreign language outcomes than monolingual English-only speakers. The profile at Nāwahi Opu'u site. So let's look at the model site, Nāwahi Opu'u. Located in Puna, Hawaii, there are 325 students from infant through 18-year-olds. 96% are Native Hawaiians. The Native Hawaiian state average is 28% in public schools. So this is a very high population, Native Hawaiian population in a school of choice. We also have 70% qualified for free and reduced lunch, which is also higher than the state's average for free and reduced lunch at around 51%. And usually within our state, Native Hawaiians are doing the most poorly in school, and those of lower income also perform very low academically. The state's overall graduation rate is 80%. So we have a very, very high at-risk and disadvantaged population. The Hawaii Department of Education seeks to increase the overall high school graduation rate from 80% to 90% by 2018 and ensure that all graduating students are earning the new college and career-ready diploma. This model is a coordinated effort between private nonprofit, the Ahapunana Leo, which runs the Punana Leo Infant, Toddler, and Language Nest program, a public charter K-8 charter school, and a 9th to 12th grade program, a school within a school partnership with a local high school, and support from the Hawaiian Language College, similar to a tribal college. And this is the model of our partnership. We find that there are natural strengths and indigenous language academic advantages of this model. English is seen as an academic goal rather than a forced assimilation. It is easy to learn due to surrounding dominant population and media. And learning Hawaiian makes our students feel very connected to Hawaii. There are also cognitive advantages of very high bilingualism and high biliteracy that supports academics. There is no advantage if you learn only a little of the language. And if you're strong in 2 languages, then it's easier to learn more languages. Some of our students have demonstrated this, as one has worked on newspapers in Italy, learning the language very quickly. A graduate joined the Peace Corps and was assigned to Kyrgyzstan and we learned that he was the most fluent in Kyrgyz amongst his peers. This student graduated from college majoring in political science and minored in both French and Spanish. So the evidence of multilingualism or seeking that goal has been demonstrated thus far. Our big goal is to revitalize our language and that the students speak Hawaiian all day. We now have the next generation raising their children in Hawaiian. We also have college students raising their children in Hawaiian. We have 33% of our students whose first language is Hawaiian, and these children have at least one parent that has spoken to them in Hawaiian since birth. I may have gone, Since our first high school graduation, and for 13 years now, we have had 100% graduation rate. We are working on our academics. Although we have 80% of our students go on to college, most at the University of Hawaii. However, some attend colleges in the mainland. We currently have students studying aerospace and mechanical engineering at Cal Poly Pomona and San Luis Obispo. We are working to further improve. This is on the state English assessments in grade 10, where our students are performing the same and even higher as Native Hawaiians in English schools. We are wanting to teach English at grade 12, similar to a college English course, and we are working through the Hawaiian Language College to do this. The model at Navahio Kalani'o Pu'u is a total Hawaiian medium P12 connected to a supportive indigenous college that includes undergraduate and graduate degrees, a teacher education certification, and a doctorate. We are a single movement. English language arts course begins in grade 5, as in Hawaii English public schools. We start with the grade 5 English curriculum and standards. English language arts is continued through grade 12. We have 4 years of high school math, 4 years of English, and 4 years of social studies. In 2010, the World Indigenous Nations Higher Education Consortium awarded its first P20 accreditation to the Hawaiian Language College and Aha Punana Leo. WINHEC includes members from indigenous Sami country in Finland, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada's indigenous peoples. We are aligned to the blueprint for reform for world-class education similar to Finland. What is unique about Finland is that they have 2 official languages, Finnish and Swedish. Education from preschool through grade 12 can be in either language. In addition, the very small population of indigenous Sami are also allowed education in their own language, and Finnish or Swedish are the additional languages, having Finland meet the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights to Education. Okay. The Hawaiian model brings hope and support to Native American linguistic and cultural continuity. Our language provides a lens to our world of indigenous peoples. Contained in our languages are our values, which nurture our children and keep them grounded through life. Not only that our students graduate, but that they leave with a worldview, how they see the world around us, and ultimately how they see themselves and appreciate other cultures. It provides the benefits of high multilingualism and is connected to P12 and Native higher education. They are able to venture out and experience life outside of Hawaii and can still come back to Hawaii and contribute to our community. So to wrap up my section for today's webinar on effective ways to teach Native American language and culture, clearly focus on language revitalization and highlight the issues and show the possibilities of Native American language immersion is supported in the recommendations for reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act from the National Congress of American Indians, the National Indian Education Association, and the Blueprint for Reform. Some of you may be thinking, but how do I start? Realizing that you may be at different levels of language loss, from a few remaining elder speakers to a few children speakers, here are some very broad statements. Develop an interest and inspire at the middle and high school level to ensure the future young adults have the knowledge of their language and traditions and will want to take charge of their own learning of their language and will want to use the language with their children. For little children, you can start with simple protocols and using your language at school. Look again at what you're doing and what's going on as far as language and culture program at the school and build on what is working and get rid of what is not. Did it just bounce back to... Oh.
There you go. There we go.
Okay. So this is the screen that I just went through.
It's next to the last.
And the message is that we can succeed using our languages as the basis of our education. Mahalo. Thank you.
Mahalo. Thank you, Nāmaka. Thank you very much for sharing with us strategies and ideas from the Hawaiian model on teaching Native American language. And now we're going to move on to the second half of our presentation on the cultural component. And before I introduce our speaker, I just want to find out from participants how many are actually participating in groups. And if you could just click the electronic hand to notify that you're participating in groups, that would be wonderful. Okay. And our next speaker is Robin Butterfield, an enrolled member of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, with ancestry also from the White Earth Ojibwa tribe of Minnesota. Robin has over 30 years of experience as an educator. She has served in many leadership capacity at the state and national level and has been elected president while serving 5 3-year terms on the National Indian Education Association, NIEA, Board of Directors. She's currently serving a 5th 3-year term on the National Indian Education Association Board of Directors and is currently the vice president. She was appointed by President Obama to serve on the National Advisory Council on Indian Education, which advises the Secretary of Education at the U.S. Department of Education. And we'd like to welcome Robin Butterfield. Robin?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be on this webinar. My section is going to shift a little bit to helping basically all teachers understand how to be more effective in working with Native children. And even if they don't speak their native language, that there's a lot of things that can be done to support those students in schools. So one of the outcomes of my section are to help us understand the importance of integrating culture throughout the curriculum. And there are lots of very simple, basic ways to do that. And I'm going to just reference a few in the short time that I have. Another thing that I'm going to talk a little bit about are some principles that I think guide a teacher in understanding how to be effective in talking about culture that comes from a program called REACH. That's Respecting Ethnic and Cultural Heritage. And we're going to get a few samples of some activities that are just small examples of how to start being more inclusive in terms of Native culture in the curriculum. And so one example that I'm going to give is a year-long program that I co-led with some of my colleagues in Oregon called the American Indian Leadership Academy, and it was really developed around the integration of Indian culture. And so I'm just going to give some examples from that program. I love this quote by Maya Angelou. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. And this sort of speaks to the notion that oftentimes when we have teachers who are talking about cultures who've been conquered by another culture, they often don't really have the tools or the understanding of what to do with that information. And so I'm going to give some guidelines. But culture in the curriculum is so important because it really is about strengthening the self-concept of our Native students, because it gives credence to their culture in the everyday life of a classroom. It then increases their motivation to participate in school experiences because it is seen as more relevant and meaningful to them and their communities. And beyond that, though, it helps all the students, Indian and non-Indian, as well as the teachers, Indian and non-Indian, acquire knowledge and self-respect and increase understanding just about human diversity in general. And it's also my contention that it just makes learning more fun. Some of the basic principles from the program I mentioned earlier called REACH come from these 5 tenets. One is that we focus intentionally on trying to bring in different multiple perspectives, and that they're not weighted in terms of one being better or less than another. A quick example of that is my daughter was in 5th grade at one time and was asked to prepare a diary account of what it felt like to be a settler having just been attacked by the Indians. And she was really struggling with that assignment because, of course, she identified with her Indian heritage, and it seemed very negative in terms of the assignment. So she and I talked about it. We talked about original sources and how she could, write a strong diary account. But I also talked to her teacher, and I asked her how she had set up the activity, what resource she'd given all of the students, not just my daughter. And I asked her if students were being asked to write from the Indian perspective. And she said, oh, well, that's a great idea. Well, I'll have them do that. So I waited a couple of days, and then I asked my daughter, I said, well, how did it go in your class? And she gave me kind of a half-hearted response. And I said, well, did your teacher give the students more information? She said, well, yeah. And I said, well, did she ask the students to write from the Indian perspective? And she said, well, you could if you wanted to. And so it's a good illustration for me about how I think even unknowingly as teachers we can often weight what's valued and what's not valued. And so this notion of multiple perspectives means understanding that we need to try and give equal weight to the varying perspectives. And there's a lot more detail that we could go in related to that. The second principle is really key here, and that is everybody has culture. And oftentimes, non-Indian students see themselves as cultural deficit, and so they don't really appreciate and honor the culture of our Native students because they don't understand the power that it plays out in their own lives. So the third principle is about it's important to build those cultural bridges and help all students understand how important they are. And one of the strategies for doing that effectively is to do it from a variety of approaches. We call it the head with the heart and the hands for healing. But basically, statistics alone are often dry and not compelling, whereas we can use movies and hands-on activities where students can actually experience life differently from another perspective. Because our ultimate goal in terms of these principles is trying to help all of our students understand how to build better communities and be co-responsible for each other. So some of the guidelines, these were originally written in a document called Effective Practices in Indian Education, which came out a number of years ago when I was working at Northwest Regional Lab. And the curriculum monograph really focused a lot on how do we think about integrating culture in an appropriate way, because we tended to see that teachers did sort of some consistent sort of stereotypic things when they talk about Indian culture. And you can almost picture it. You see a map of the United States, and there are these large geographic groupings, and they usually start in the past, and they move forward, but rarely come into contemporary times. It's usually around first contact, and it leaves a lot of our students, both Indian and non-Indian students, with the impression that somehow Native people disappeared. So this is a list of how to refocus how we work with culture. One is to focus on the contemporary issues. Start with today. What's going on in real-life Indian communities today? Not that history, and then use history to help explain that. An example I gave in Oregon was the largest Indian community in Oregon is in Portland. And so then you can talk about, well, how did that happen? Well, lots of Native people were required to move off reservations to seek jobs, and many of them, through the Indian Relocation Act, ended up in large urban centers like Portland. So that's how you can use history, but focusing on what's really going on today in the communities. Oftentimes teachers are also frustrated with the notion that they don't know where to start. They've got, at least half a dozen or more Native tribes in the classroom, and they say things like, well, you can't expect me to teach you about all of them. So some guiding notions is to focus on the groups nearest the school in terms of original land ownership, or if you've got a concentration of one tribe over others in the classroom, that's a good place to start. But then you can use all of the other representations as comparisons and opportunities for students to expand their learning around the rich diversity of tribal cultures that we have. The third principle, dealing with real-life controversial issues. So many of our children are dealing with those tough issues at home, and they need to be given skills and background information and understanding to help deal with those. We've got high poverty, we've got, alcoholism. We've also got rich cultural traditions. We've got powwows and all kinds of, wonderful things that our communities are participating in still, even in urban centers, and those things need to be brought to the fore. This next one really tries to talk about not trivializing culture, not looking at just beadwork and baskets and totem poles, but really talking about the expertise of the community that was put into play in terms of creating even the objects that we are looking at. What was the knowledge of the environment that was needed to gather certain grasses or things at certain seasons, food sources, highly sophisticated communities, lots of herbal wealth of knowledge and wellness and astronomy and all of the things that, come with being a survivor in a natural environment. So it's not just about, aren't these things interesting and pretty, but, what really went into the processes of life that created what we have in terms of our cultural artifacts. And then the last principle is recognizing that we always have experts in our community, and they're not always just in the traditional cultural sense. Individuals, for example, who have gone off to boarding schools or have gone into the military or who run a business or, are also different kinds of role models that our Native children need to understand. Those individuals who successfully navigated several different cultural experiences are wonderful experts for students to learn from. And when we ran our leadership program, that's what we did, was to bring in individuals who both understood who they were as Native people, but also found a place in a contemporary community and provided, valuable expertise, whether it was in health careers or education careers or running a small business or whatever. Because too often we know that a lot of our Native youth have had problems in school. We all know the negative statistics that we hear a lot about. And there's a body of research that focused on individuals who had high self-esteem. Those individuals have a sense of connectedness, a sense of uniqueness. They have a sense of their own personal power, and they also have role models, actual live individuals who they can emulate. And we also know from the research on self-esteem that 80% of a student's self-esteem can come from its peer group. So that speaks to the notion that it's really important to influence the peer culture in a positive way, because so many of our students that I've worked with feel disconnected, and they feel disconnected from school, their culture, significant adult role models, and each other, especially in large urban centers. I was the director of the Indian Ed program in Salem and coordinated with the Portland district to create a program called the American Indian Alaska Native Leadership Academy. And what we did was bring students together and took them on a journey. And it was based on good research for basically professional development, in that you can't expect people to change their attitudes and behaviors with, kind of one-shot experiences. And we are very good in Indian country about, immersing our kids in cultural camps in the summer or, ongoing activities sometimes. But what we recognized was that we also wanted to influence peer culture in a positive way. And so we brought, originally it was 60 students, then it was 80, then 100, and 120 by the time I finished working with the group. We would bring them together for one full day a month for about 4 or 5 months. And each one of those days had a cultural theme. And the transformation that we saw in our students was phenomenal, from being very shy and withdrawn to assuming, very proactive leadership roles. So this mission statement that you see is one that the students created themselves, and it's very clear. They said, "We are a community of Native youth who are connected by pride in our cultures, who are learning to become leaders, who are striving to become better role models and helping others to be more confident in themselves." And so what our students focused on was they had to understand more about what being a cultural citizen really was. And the objectives of the academy were fourfold. One was, of course, to have our students complete middle and high school. We used the program as a transition of 8th graders into high school, assuming that once they had some peer support, they would feel more comfortable, because most of our Indian kids in urban centers are very isolated from each other. We had 5 high schools, 9 middle schools, and I think about 40 elementary schools. And our students were sprinkled all across the district. So they often felt alone and not supported. So our second goal was to build a support network and a sense of community for those students. And we did it actually even across communities, because we combined our resources in Salem with those of the Indian program in Portland, as well as those at Chemau Indian High School and the Grand Ronde Tribe. The third bullet then, of course, is kind of heightened here because we used Indian culture all the time as a way to ground our students and reconnect them and reinforce those elements of self-esteem: connectedness, uniqueness, power, and models. And then the fourth goal was an interesting one because it sort of became more intentional as we went along, and that was to help to build the capacity of school district staff who were largely non-Indian so that they could better meet the needs of our Native students. And we did that by involving them in the program, and they were often involved in a lot of the support discussion groups that our students were engaged in. An example of our use of both language and culture in an opening activity, the whole first day that we worked with our students was all about immersion in Native culture. And one of the activities we used was this one called Native Greetings. So from a variety of different tribes, we have a list of greetings here: Klahauya, Poso, Anin, Bigay, Numa, Hois, Shagole, Loma, Nido Shatsi'i, and Toshikia. And this activity was, a grouping activity in a sense, but it also was an initial idea for helping our students understand the diversity of Native tribes, but also the power of language and how cultural embedded it is. So what we had the students do was to learn the greetings, and then we would number them off by, I think there are about 10 greetings, and so every student would have a number, and that number was assigned to a greeting. So they had to say the greeting over and over again until they found everybody in the room with the same greeting, and then their assignment was to sit down and, as a group, guess at where the greeting came from and what it meant. And then we would go around the room, and each of those groupings then would share their ideas. So one of the other objectives of this activity was to create a climate in which guessing is okay. Because I found in peer culture that Native students are very hard on each other, and they don't want to make a mistake in front of their peer group. So we set up activities where everybody was on an equal playing field in terms of lack of information. And so they started out having to guess and take chances with people who are different from themselves. These next few slides just talk a little bit about traditional Native leadership. And this first one focusing on the notion that historically our leaders were about taking care of the people. It was the job of the leader to, feed the people, keep them safe, settle disputes, etc. And generosity was central to all of our communities, that individuals were dependent upon each other, so that leadership was usually by consensus, not coercion. And decisions were debated. They were things that invited others to be part of. So I'm going to kind of skip through some of these. Certainly there were female leaders, and battle was a proving ground for leadership, but it was heavily grounded in spirituality. And so what we did was to take our students, and on the very first day we gave them a new paradigm for leadership to think about. If you look at this graphic, it shows sort of on the left-hand side the sort of contemporary model of leadership. You can think of the corporate model or the military model, where the leader is at the apex of the triangle at the top, and they give the directives to the next tier, and they give theirs to the next tier, and you've got your foot soldiers on the bottom that carry out a lot of the directives. But in Indian culture, we said this triangle is turned upside down. And the leader is the person at the apex, at the bottom of the triangle, whose job it is to support and take care of that next tier of people, who in turn take care of the ones that they're connected to. So in reality, if everybody buys into that understanding of a leader, then it's really a circle, because everybody is responsible for everybody else. And what happened to our students was that they understood that there wasn't just one leader, that each and every one of them had a responsibility to be a good leader and take care of other people in the group. And it created this incredibly cohesive community where our students fully participated, they cared about each other. It was very loving. You could walk in the door and everybody would be hugging everybody, which isn't a common thing often seen in Indian country, but we managed to create that sense of community. And if you read down those characteristics of that type of leader, it's all about learning together, teamwork, cooperation, creating a different vision of what community could be. It's inclusive, empowering, and it involves everybody equally. Here's a list of some of the Native games that we played. I don't have time to go into all of the directions of them, but we spent the entire first day of our Leadership Academy just getting comfortable with each other using these games. The one, Camp Robbers, I think was one where there was an object placed in the middle, and there were two lines of students, and they would call out certain numbers, and two of them would race to the center, and whoever grabbed the object first then had to race back to their line before the person on the opposing side touched them, so that they could keep the object. Echolocation was kind of like everybody, the person who was it would close their eyes, and they would have to find the person who was making the sound. One of the favorites of our students was the All My Risky Relations. And basically, the All My Relations activity is kind of a version of musical chairs, where you have a person that's in the middle, and they say, all my relations, who, and they'll identify something like who are wearing tennis shoes. And everyone who's wearing tennis shoes has to get up and move to another seat before somebody else takes that seat. And so there's always somebody left out, and then that person is the person in the middle. And what that program evolved, that game evolved into, was also a way to have conversations about our students' behaviors. when we had our whole day focused on health and wellness and healthy relationships, we did a little tweak of the activity and we called it All My Risky Relations, who. And so it would be things like who never look both ways when they cross the street, or doesn't use a helmet when they ride a bike, or doesn't buckle their seat belt, but it also got into other even more risky behaviors, which our students, talked about openly, had ever practiced unsafe sex, or had ever smoked, or, had been drinking when they shouldn't have. So those kinds of things. So there again, we're using Native culture to get to some of the contemporary issues that were of importance to our students. This is a graphic that also comes from the REACH Center, and we used it to move into an activity called Cultural Bags. And we talked about the fact that everybody in the room has an ethnicity, and many of our Native children come with multiple ethnicities. They're part Black, they're part Cheyenne, they're part Mexican American, they're part Ho-Chunk, whatever it is. And often there's confusion. They think that because they don't know more about one of their tribal identities, then that makes there's something wrong with them. So we talk about that center circle as what you're born into. We're all born with certain things. But the second circle is the one that focuses on the notion of culture. And culture is what we learn and experience. And there's a lot of power in understanding that we can relearn or unlearn, whatever it is that we want to culturally. So this activity involved our students taking an empty suitcase, because there's the analogy that we carry around our culture with us whether we understand it or not. And so we brainstorm all the elements of a generic cultural bag, and then we ask the students to pick some of those elements and then describe themselves. And so these are some of the examples of what comes out in the brainstorm, but it's this whole bag is full by the time we're finished, because there are a lot of things that we don't see that are very much operating in our lives, our values, our mores, our expectations from our parents, our gender roles. A lot of those things really play out in terms of who we are. And so what we wanted our students to feel is validated with whatever they brought to the table at this point in time is who they are, and it's okay to be who they are, that they're rich culturally, both in participants of a contemporary society, as well as those who have deeper understandings of some of their traditional aspects. So I just have a few cultural bags that I'll just scroll through so you can kind of see what some of the students prepared, and you can see how diverse their bags are. So with this one, friends is important, Michael Jackson, that really dates this slide, basketball, and then whichever bag it is, we always had our students, they always had their tribe in there someplace. So here's another one that shows all the variety of photography, taking trips, basketball, etc. And she's a Chippewa Ho-Chunk. Here's a Warm Springs student from Oregon who was big into softball, loved music, basketball, etc. Here's another female student who was just learning to drive. You see the big keys, downhill skiing, water sports, and you can't see it, but in the background are all kinds of words that describe the fullness of the student's life. And here's another one. Money looks big to this person, Ho-Chunk. So those are just a few samples of some of the activities, but we really felt that our children valued themselves to the degree that they had been valued and that they were allowed to explore their own backgrounds and traditions. On our Wellness Day, we used the medicine wheel a lot through a variety of activities to emphasize that to be a whole person, you need to be balanced mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. I'm going to skip that one. So basically what we did then was create an entire curriculum about reconnecting our students to their schools, their culture, lots of adult role models, and to each other. And I wanted to end with this quote by Paulo Freire, which I think is so powerful, because even if we aren't integrating Indian culture into the curriculum, we are teaching culture, because everything that we do is culturally based. So I like the way that he put it, and I'll just, if you'll bear with me, read it. There's no such thing as a neutral educational process. Education either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate the integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity to it, or it becomes a practice of freedom, the means by which men and women deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of the world. And we wanted our students, our Native students, to really feel like they had that sense of power and that they could be contributors in terms of creating a different type of community.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Robin. Nāmaka Rawlins, this is such a beautiful presentation, and we do have a few questions. And we have come to the question and answer segment of our webinar. And I will go ahead and ask a couple of questions, and Nāmaka or Robin, feel free to answer these questions. We have one question from a participant focusing more on culture. The aspect of cultural sensitivity seems to focus only on content, making sure that what is taught is grounded in Native culture perspective. The participant would like to know where's the cultural sensitivity to how that content is taught, respecting traditional ways of, say, visual spatial learning?
This is Robin. I think I was trying to demonstrate through some of the examples of the activity that it is all about the how that it's taught. It was very interactive. The examples that I gave, there was lots of movement, there was lots of variety. We even got into academics where we had speech contests and writing, but it's all about creating that environment in which risk-taking is part of it, and emphasizing a different set of values that are all cultural based. So I agree with the comment. It's the how and the what.
Okay, thank you. And so what is a community role? Like, what is a community role in the development of the educational activities you mentioned?
I'm going to let Nāmaka go first, because I know her community was very heavily involved in the whole Punana Leho movement.
Hi, aloha. So the community, my answer to that is that the community's role for us was very important. It drove the entire movement. So coming out from within our communities, the desire to revitalize our language and to have it become a living language was a focus. Having a mission, so focused, mission-driven, and a focused leadership. So it in the reestablishment of a system of education in our own language came from community. It came from within the community, from families, from the parents of children and grandparents, our elders. So it definitely came from within.
Nāmaka, didn't you also have parents learning the language along with their students?
Yes. So the drive wasn't about an institution that would have to do the work. It came from our own parents. And like I said, the focus on leadership, parents were learning the language along with the children. Of course, the children quickly surpassed the parents. Our parents also became our teachers, having returned to school and becoming fluent in Hawaiian. They were then our teachers. We had a very high Native Hawaiian teacher population growth from the revitalization movement. So our own parents went back to school and became teachers for our schools. As they went up to grades, grades 10 K through 12.
Mm-hmm. And now one participant is stressing, how do you make culture and language appeal to the younger generation, where you have Facebook and friends are a top priority to the young generation? How do you get people to want to learn their own culture, their history, and language?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, and then I'll let Nāmaka. At the end of the program that I was describing, we had our students sit in a great big circle, and we asked them the question, what did you get out of this experience? And most of them said, with kind of shaking knees, first of all, they couldn't have stood up in a group that large and talked, but secondly, that it made them feel part of something larger than themselves. They wanted to do better in school, and they said they wished that somebody had told them how important it was earlier because they could have done better. But they said that they wanted to learn more about their own individual tribal heritages, that they were much more motivated to get the specific information. So I think you can create a climate where that's the priority of the students, just by how you build the community.
And now, are any of the students involved in any of the curriculum development?
Oh, actually,
of either program?
Yeah, I know Nāmaka can talk a lot about this. We had our students become the creators of a lot of the activities after the first year once they got their feet wet. But
okay.
Yes, and that also is true here too. Our students will create. We started a newspaper in Hawaiian, so our students from across the state will contribute from the elementary grades. Will contribute to some of that to that media. I also wanted to say that this the whole social media, Facebook, and how to inspire. It's all about inspiring our young students, So for us here in Hawaii, it's a priority for us in Hawaii. Our language has taken. Our language and culture has become not has become, but it is a part of our whole identity, and everyone is, I guess on board with that. We have, as an official language of our state. So there's the recognition and acknowledging the status of our language. We have much more to do, but we've established that as a community priority for us here in Hawaii.
Okay. And now, are students from other indigenous groups that are now living in the United States be considered under the Indian Act? Do you know?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
That students from other indigenous groups that are not, that have moved to the United States, say they are from Latin America or South America, be considered under the Indian Act?
If they're speaking specifically about the Office of Indian Education, the Title VII Indian programs, because they designate American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians specifically. So no, they would not.
Okay.
And they count how many students can document through their parents who's an American Indian, relative to the definition that's in the Federal Register.
Okay.
Correct.
And we do have a few more questions. What I'll do is I'll basically, I'll just go ahead and pick one, and then I'll email the questions afterwards for our presenters, since we're coming close to the end of time here. We have one participant who talks about the tribal college that they're working with, which is located in an urban area, and it's multi-tribal. And they were looking at exploring how to incorporate language and culture into the early childhood center curriculum and to better free service teachers. Do you have any recommendations as far as models are concerned or what they should explore?
You want to talk a little about your Hawaiian college, Nāmaka?
Okay, I keep putting my thing on mute, but okay. Here, I'll tell you what we have here in Hawaii. We have a teacher preparation program for schools that are using Hawaiian as a medium of education. We have both here in Hilo at the Hawaiian Language College, and also at Manoa, the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So the program here in Hilo, specifically the Kahua Viola program, works with student teachers, and then they get assigned to some of the immersion classrooms across the state to do their practicum. So that's how we're set up here in our teacher education, focused on preparing teachers to teach in an all Hawaiian medium setting.
So I think as a practical matter, I think the considerations would be involved with, what's your critical mass of native speakers who can, work with the young people, and that's how you would have to start to focus in an urban situation, I think.
Well, as we come to the end of our webinar, any last-minute note or consideration, Robin or Nāmaka?
No, just that I appreciate so much the fact that Owela and Nasela have offered this. Yeah, I think it's a first-time opportunity, and I'm more than happy to respond to questions, after the webinar is finished. And it's always a pleasure to work with my friend and colleague, Nāmaka.
Thank you. I want to say the same too. Thank you for inviting me to participate, and I'm happy to answer questions. I think my second to the last slide in my presentation may be of help for that tribal college as to some ideas that could help teachers be prepared for the different levels of language levels for their communities that the teachers will be placed at. So, and I'm happy to answer questions as well. And mahalo, Robin, mahalo to Kasia, all of you for putting this webinar together for us.
Miigwech and Pinagigi.
Mahalo. Thank you very much. And I'd like to also thank all of our participants for logging in and participating and sending in questions for today's webinar. The webinar today, Effective Ways to Teach Native American Language and Culture, was presented by Trinidad Torres Carrion, who had her remarks in the beginning, Robin Butterfield, and Nāmaka Rawlins. And it was hosted by the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition, NCELA, located at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development at the George Washington University. Just a note to all of our participants, the final PowerPoint slides will be available on our website at www.ncela.gwu.edu/webinars. And there you will find Trinidad Torres Carrion's email address if you have any further questions, Robin Butterfield's email address, along with Nāmaka Rawlins' email address as well. And if you have any questions regarding the archived webinar or anything else containing the technical component of the webinar, please email kflemons@gwu.edu. Thank you very much for participating in today's webinar.
Thank you, Katia.
Thank you all.
Thank you.